The history books say that on August 6th, 1945, a city was erased. They give you numbers and statistics, a sanitized version of hell. They'll tell you that somewhere around 140,000 people died in Hiroshima by the end of that year, a number so vast it's almost impossible to comprehend. They show you black and white photos of rubble and a skeletal dome. But there's another layer the history books can't quantify. What people say still lingers. In Hiroshima, some locals and visitors describe moments that feel like more than grief. Faint voices near the rivers, a presence around the ruins, a weight that arrives without warning. Whether you see that as literal spirits or trauma that clings to place, the stories persist. The city was rebuilt, but not everything feels finished. It began as a beautiful, clear-skied Monday morning. It was the kind of summer day filled with the hum of a city waking up. People were heading to work, children to school. Air raid sirens had become a part of daily life. But the B-29 bomber that appeared high in the sky that morning, shimmering silver against the blue, seemed like just another reconnaissance plane. It was named the Enola Gay. Its target was the distinctive T-shaped Aioi Bridge, a landmark in the city's bustling heart. At 8:15 a.m., the world changed forever. The bomb, codenamed Little Boy, missed its target slightly. It detonated about 600 meters, or just under 2,000 feet, directly above the Shima Surgical Clinic. There was no sound at first, just a flash. A silent, searing, brilliant white light brighter than 1,000 suns. For those at or near the hypocenter, their existence was over in a fraction of a second. Temperatures reached an estimated 3,000 to 4,000 degrees Celsius, incinerating everything and everyone, leaving only faint, dark stains on pavement and walls, the now infamous atomic shadows. These shadows were the last testament to a person's presence on Earth. A man waiting for a bank to open, a person pushing a cart. Their forms seared into the stone by the thermal rays. In that instant, they were simply gone. Then came the shockwave. It traveled faster than the sound of its own creation, a crushing wall of force that annihilated everything in its path. Over 70% of the city's buildings were destroyed or severely damaged. Wooden homes, ancient temples, modern offices, all of it turned to splinters and dust. Fires erupted everywhere, merging into a monstrous firestorm that created its own wind, a whirlwind of flame that sucked the oxygen from the air and turned the city into a furnace. For those who survived the initial flash and blast, a new, unimaginable horror was just beginning. Akiko Takakura was one of them. She was inside the Bank of Hiroshima, only 300 meters from the hypocenter, shielded by the building's concrete walls. When she stumbled outside, she recalled a scene from a living hell. The beautiful morning had become a murky twilight, the sky choked with smoke and dust. The air was filled not with screams, but with a horrifying, stunned silence. People shambled through the streets like a procession of ghosts. Their clothes were burned away. Their skin, blackened and blistered, hung from their flesh in ragged strips. One survivor described it as looking like melting nylon stockings. They held their arms out in front of them, palms up, to prevent the raw, agonizing flesh from touching anything. They were the hibakusha, the bomb-affected people, and they walked in a daze, their minds unable to process what had just happened. Survivor testimonies described them as being as silent as ghosts, their bodies seeming to disintegrate as they walked. An agonizing, desperate thirst consumed them. The fires had created an inferno, and their bodies were racked with unimaginable burns. They flocked to the 7 rivers of Hiroshima, looking for relief from the pain, their single, desperate cry echoing through the ruins. Mizu, Mizu, water, water. But the rivers offered no salvation. They were already choked with the bodies of the dead and dying. Then the sky opened up. But it wasn't rain that fell. It was a black, greasy, foul-smelling liquid. The black rain. The bomb's mushroom cloud had sucked up dirt, debris, ash, and the vaporized remains of the city, condensing it all into radioactive drops that fell back to Earth. This black rain was a terrifying symbol of the poison that had been unleashed. It stained everything it touched, a final, grim anointing of the dead and the doomed. The survivors, desperate from thirst, opened their mouths to the sky, drinking the poisoned water that would only seal their fate. The immediate death toll from the blast and firestorm is estimated to have been between 70,000 and 80,000 people. But in the days, weeks, and months that followed, tens of thousands more would succumb to the invisible killer: radiation sickness. Their hair fell out, purple spots appeared on their skin, and they wasted away from the inside out, dying in agony. By the end of 1945, the number of dead had climbed to around 140,000. But the dying didn't stop there. For decades, survivors battled cancers and other long-term illnesses, a lingering curse from that single, terrible morning. The bomb didn't just kill, it created a living hell, and from that hell, stories began to emerge. Stories that suggest not all of the dead found peace. Today, Hiroshima is a vibrant, modern metropolis, rebuilt from the ashes into a symbol of peace and resilience. At its heart lies the Peace Memorial Park, a beautiful, sprawling green space dedicated to the memory of the victims and the hope for a world without nuclear weapons. It's a place of quiet reflection, somber memorials, and school children leaving colorful, folded paper cranes. But for some, this sacred ground isn't just a memorial. People talk about a palpable heaviness that settles on you as you walk the park, a feeling that's hard to shake even in daylight. A few investigators and spiritual practitioners describe Hiroshima as unusually intense, not because it's spooky, but because the grief here has scale. In their interpretation, lives ended too suddenly, too violently, with too much left unresolved, leaving behind not proof of ghosts, but a pattern of experiences that refuses to disappear. In Japanese folklore, there is a belief in yurei, spirits said to linger when death is sudden, violent, or untended by proper rites. The idea isn't universally accepted as literal fact, but it's a cultural language people use to describe places where suffering seems to cling. A yurei is often tied to a powerful emotion at the moment of death: sorrow, regret, fear. Given what happened here, tens of thousands gone in an instant, countless unidentified, many never properly mourned. Some people frame Hiroshima's lingering heaviness through that lens. One of the most persistent legends of the Peace Park is the sound of disembodied voices, whispering or crying out for Mizu, Mizu. It's the same desperate plea for water that filled the air in the hours after the bombing. Tourists, often late at night when the park is empty, report hearing faint cries coming from the direction of the rivers, a ghostly echo of the victims' final moments. It's said to be the voices of children, forever searching for a drink to quench a fire that still burns. The most iconic structure in the park is the Genbaku Dome, or Atomic Bomb Dome. Formerly the Hiroshima Prefectural Industrial Promotion Hall, Its skeletal frame stood almost directly under the hypocenter. Everyone inside was killed instantly. Today, it stands as a stark reminder of the bomb's power, and it is here that paranormal activity is most frequently reported. People walking by the dome at night have reported seeing ghostly, hazy figures moving within its empty shell. Some have captured photographs that appear to show faces in the windows, fleeting apparitions that vanish as quickly as they appear. There are claims of sudden cold spots, even on humid summer nights, and the inexplicable feeling of being watched by unseen eyes. The city's bridges are also hotspots for these encounters. So many fled to the rivers, and so many died on those bridges or in the waters below. There are stories of people crossing a bridge late at night and seeing a lone figure standing in the middle, staring down into the water. As they get closer, the figure seems to fade away. One local legend tells of a woman in white, her form hazy and indistinct, who is sometimes seen leaping from a bridge, a silent, repeating reenactment of a suicide from that terrible time. A physical therapist in Hiroshima recounted a story where she and her co-worker, both sensitive to spirits, refused to leave their homes on August 6th. They claim that on the anniversary of the bombing, the city fills with disfigured ghosts wandering by the river and surrounding areas, a sight so upsetting they can't bear to witness it. These stories aren't always told like campfire entertainment. In Japan, places tied to mass death are often spoken about carefully, part history, part belief, part the sense that a location can hold an imprint long after the event has passed. During Obon, when tradition holds that spirits return to visit, some say Hiroshima feels heavier, and reports of unusual experiences seem to increase. Whether that's the supernatural or simply a season when memory becomes sharper, the pattern repeats, and people keep describing the same kinds of moments in the same places. The spectral echoes of 1945 are not confined to the past. They bleed into the present, manifesting in modern encounters that are just as unsettling. These aren't just vague feelings of sadness. They are personal, chilling experiences reported by visitors and locals long after the war. One of the most compelling modern accounts comes from the acclaimed novelist David Mitchell, author of Cloud Atlas. In the 1990s, before he was a famous writer, Mitchell lived in Hiroshima for 8 years. He explains that in 1945, thousands of horrifically burned victims fled the incinerated city, making their way north along the Ota River in a desperate search for help. Many died right there on its banks. Mitchell describes waking up one night with 4 certainties. A ghost was standing at the foot of his bed. It was male and much older than him. It was not a burglar because the door was locked, and most unnervingly, the ghost did not want to be looked at. Overcome with dread, Mitchell lay with his eyes squeezed shut and spoke aloud in clumsy Japanese. He introduced himself, stated his name and job, and explained how long he'd be living there, ending with a polite request for acceptance. After a minute of terrifying silence, he felt a new certainty. The visitor was gone, apparently satisfied. This story highlights a key aspect of Hiroshima's hauntings. The spirits are not always aggressive. Sometimes they seem lost, confused, or simply present. This idea of a lingering presence also connects to a concept in Japanese folklore known as goryo, vengeful spirits associated with injustice. Hiroshima's victims were not powerful courtiers or nobles, but some people argue that injustice on this scale creates its own kind of unrest, a collective sense that something went unresolved. Others interpret the same reports in non-supernatural terms: expectation, grief, and the psychological pressure of standing in a place so symbolically charged. Either way, The claims tend to cluster around the same areas, near the hypocenter, around the dome, and along the rivers, where memory and geography overlap. The spirits of children are an especially tragic part of this paranormal lore. Sadako Sasaki was 2 years old and at her home about a mile from the hypocenter when the bomb fell. She survived without any apparent injuries, only to develop leukemia a decade later from the radiation exposure. While in the hospital, she began folding 1,000 paper cranes, a symbol of hope in Japan. She folded over 1,300 before she passed away at the age of 12. Her story is one of heartbreaking resilience, but the Children's Peace Monument dedicated to her has become a focal point for the spirits of other children. Visitors have reported hearing the faint sound of a child's laughter near the monument, only to find no one there. Others claim to have seen a fleeting glimpse of a small girl in a school uniform, who vanishes when they turn to look. The pain of the hibakusha wasn't just physical, it was social. For decades after the war, many survivors were ostracized. Fear and ignorance about radiation led to discrimination in marriage and employment, and countless people were pressured into silence. That second injury, being shunned after surviving, adds another layer to Hiroshima's unrest. Some interpret the city's ghost lore through this lens, not angry spirits in a movie sense, but a sense of unfinished recognition. Voices that feel like they're insisting the story not be buried twice. The testimonies of survivors themselves often blur the line between memory and the supernatural. They repeatedly describe the victims they saw as looking like ghosts. Sueko Hada, a survivor, spoke of the voices of her sisters trapped in their burning home, voices that haunted her for the rest of her life. "That's the most painful thing," she said, "that I ran away from my sisters. I will never be happy." This profound, lifelong guilt is a kind of haunting in itself, the living haunted by the dead. The stories of spectral figures are, perhaps, the external manifestation of an internal torment, the embodiment of a wound that has never truly healed. The stories that pour out of Hiroshima, the spectral figures in the A-bomb dome, the disembodied cries for water, the chilling personal encounters, are more than just ghost stories. They are echoes of an unimaginable agony. They are the psychic residue of 140,000 souls violently torn from their lives in a flash of man-made light. Whether you believe in ghosts as literal spirits or as the shape trauma takes when it's too large for language, Hiroshima produces a consistent pattern. People describe voices, figures, cold pockets of air, and a heaviness that arrives without warning. Some interpret that through concepts like yurei and goryo. Others see it as memory embedded in place. History so concentrated, it changes how the body behaves while you stand inside it. What's hardest to dismiss isn't any single story, but how persistently the stories return, and how similar they can sound across decades. If there is anger in these stories, it doesn't feel like a malevolent force. It feels like moral injury, an injustice so extreme it still echoes in how people speak, how they remember, and how the city is experienced. Hiroshima's ghost lore becomes less about jump scares and more about consequence. A permanent scar on the conscience of humanity. A reminder that some events don't end cleanly just because a skyline returns. We have rebuilt the city. We have erected monuments and planted gardens. We hold ceremonies and offer prayers. But have we truly listened to the voices? Have we understood the message they carry from that hellscape of August 6th, 1945? Hiroshima doesn't have to haunt in order to matter. It only has to be remembered accurately and felt honestly. The The question isn't whether the dead are speaking. The question is whether the living are willing to listen to what history has already told us, and what places like this still make impossible to ignore. Horror Across Borders exists to examine why certain places across the world feel wrong, long after they've been rebuilt, reopened, or forgotten, where history, belief, and fear overlap. Thanks for joining our journey. Don't forget to subscribe and check out the next video on screen for another investigation into the world's darkest mysteries. New investigations from Horror Across Borders are released every Tuesday and Thursday.